Shitty timing. Therefore, there you go. That's straight. So it's just Rick Thompson, James Salame, and myself to start this one off.
Welcome to Jazz Cabbage Cafe, all of our audio listeners on Alexa and Spotify and all the different podcasting platforms we appear on.
Many more to join us throughout the show, including our special guest today, Amie Carter. We'll talk about Jayden's laws and a lot of other work that she's been doing. But let us recognize our awesome sponsors and try to read them off. I don't know if we've ever confirmed if that works or not yet, but I guess we'll do it again. You ready, Rick?
I am ready.
All right.
Jazz Cabbage Cafe sponsors include the Botanical Company, Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions, the Detroit Nutrient Company, and GrowGreenMI.com.
Grow Green, Michigan. All right. Well,
could you hear that?
I could hear it. I just don't know if it's.
Jim's nodding his head.
Hey, Joe.
Joe says, what's going on?
We could all hear it. Here's Adam. Adam's fresh off of surgery.
Wow.
That didn't sound very good, Adam. We're happy to see you home. Last time I saw pictures of you, it was in a hospital bed, sir.
Yeah, I've been back and forth. I'm doing all right. It's just a struggle.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Heal fast, buddy. Heal fast.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yep. So.
Keep on thinking of his head just being kind of teed up.
That's how it feels,
Yeah.
dude. Sometimes I get to the point, like, I can't sit up anymore because holding my head, balancing my head up on these shoulders, it's just easier to go lay down. So that I just came from laying down.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us through all of the pain and misery, Mr. Hashbash, Adam Brook, and as Jim mentioned, speedy recovery to you.
Yeah, I'm glad it was a successful surgery. Hope you get the benefits out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So last week we pre-recorded a interview with Andrew Brisbo and had attorney Paul Talinda on to discuss the new packaging rules and things like that. I think that ultimately we discussed that the concept of doing this makes sense for the state. It's directed by law, all that kind of stuff. But I couldn't help but try to impart to him that while all of that is true, we don't need to be like equating, the possibility of a young person coming across an edible with a call to the poison center, a trip to the hospital, and all this.
That's
just
what
try to temper that image a little bit along this conversation.
Yeah,
probably was not successful, but anyway, that's what I attempted to do.
Well, and I think the point though is well made that although our society demands that we put warning labels on everything about everything, which doesn't always make sense to us, the fact is, the statistics prove there isn't a rash of medical marijuana poisonings in America. And when children do get their hands on it when they're not supposed to, it's a temporary inconvenience, not a debilitating situation. I think the fact that they have to use data from the poison control hotline to prove that there's some kind of damage is telling. They're not using hospital data. They're not using doctor's appointments data. They're not using physician provided data. It's phone calls for advice to a poison service, and that's the only thing I can point to demonstrate.
It's just response.
harm.
There's never like an actual case pointed out where there was follow-up issue.
The interesting thing about that is if you were to look into the numbers of calls to poison control, you will find that there are many more substances that receive many more phone calls to poison control that are thought of to be harmless.
Yeah. Well, and I think we all agree that they're not focusing on the most dangerous things in America. That's for sure.
Well, and I would say now that they have their little enforcement division, or marijuana belongs to some sort of grouping, I would say that group, whether it's the MRA or the tobacco people or whoever's handling marijuana should also have to field those calls, because it just doesn't fall into poison. And to relate it to poison, I said to Jamie yesterday, they don't put the poison control number on the sugared cereals.
Mm-hmm.
No.
But that is the accepted place for parents. When you have a question about what your kid has ingested, whether it's benign or whether it's terrible, that's who you call. So I appreciate what your point is, but I see why that's a convenient thing. My point was just that the metric they're using is so obscure because they don't have any more definitive metrics through the traditional ways we measure poison. So, yeah.
It is interesting, though, that when the cops think they ate too many edibles and they think they're dying, they don't call poison control.
They call 911.
911.
I know.
What's the wing score? Just want to make sure same reality.
Yeah. No.
That was one of the greatest calls of all time.
It's a Dearborn cops. We have a distinguished Michigan representation there.
For our listeners that may not be familiar with this, in the cannabis industry, there's a very famous call made by some off-duty police officers who ate some edibles. I'm not sure exactly how they got their hands on them, but they called a 911 because they thought they were going to die. And
they took it out of the evidence locker.
Yes, they stole the edible.
What? Even worse of a story. But the fact is, you're a cop, you're calling 911, you're kind of busting on yourself for doing that. Just a horrible circumstance. And police officers, who should be the most cautious of anybody, were just apparently hogging them down.
And had they called poison control, nobody would have ever heard about it.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think you'll be all right. Sleep.
Hot.
Hopefully, sleep it off. Actually, I guess we should do a little research and find out what the response is from poison control when somebody were to make such a call.
Put on a movie channel and go to sleep, man.
Pour yourself a bowl of cereal.
There's this really old
chocolate sauce on top.
Exactly. There's this really old chart that has like various known drugs and their antidotes, and cannabis appears on it, with the antidote being caffeine.
Right.
Which kind of makes some sense in some ways. But
well, if you consider cannabis as a depressant, then having a stimulant added would make sense to counter. I don't consider cannabis to be a depressant as much as perhaps medical science does, just because of my personal experience.
Yeah, I guess at the time you're having a problem with it, it might be because of overeating concentrates or something, something like that. And
back in the day when people would come into the dispensary and they'd have these issues, we were looking for answers to give them in some sort of direction. And cracked pepper, or
black pepper,
chewing on black peppercorn, that's what I meant, is a way to somehow take down that psychoactivity of THC.
Really?
As well as
there's some naturally occurring terpenes that are found in black pepper that are also found in cannabis.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's something happening there. And then there's also a glass of orange juice.
Well, that's more for a low blood sugar issue. That the sugar aspect of cannabis is when people kind of start to feel like they're losing, like they're going down, like they're about to pass out, fade out. A lot of that's because cannabis naturally lowers your blood sugar. And for some people, going that extra 5 or 10 points from where they were to where it takes them, we call it, in Amsterdam, we call it a whitey. And you can see these guys and girls stand up from across the room, and they you see them kind of wobble a little bit, and you see the color draining out of their face. And they all say the same thing: I got to get some fresh air. And when the bartender hears that, they pour the orange juice and they put it on the counter. And they wait for the son of a bitch to get to the front door. And sure enough, as soon as they hit that front door, bam, their face first into the ground. You sit them up, you give them a sip of orange juice, and they generally come right back at it.
Nice.
There's several products on the line nowadays to combat this too high kind of a thing. Oftentimes people believe CBD counteracts the effects of THC to the point where you can use it to bring someone down that's too high. There's also items like Parachute, which is a product that's manufactured here in Michigan, I believe, that would do something similar. Cannabidiol, I think, is far easier to use than anything else. And for most of us, CBD's just a gummy away. most of us have it available right on our desk. So
Shelly Smith joins us. Shelly Bowbelly.
Shelly and Adam having a contest for who has the better hat today.
I think it's a tie.
Well, I can switch.
Adam
up.
has the more substantial neck brace.
Mine's the dirtiest.
I can go pink.
Shelly's got overalls on though, so
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
now I got overalls over there.
Yeah, that's right. This is one of the few times I've seen
Underwear?
Adam on the show without overalls. That's true.
No,
That's
well, yeah, 'cause
true.
I don't have any pants on.
Nice. So,
And we
Black-
now have to achieve a different rating for this show.
No, you don't. You just got to remind me
it's
not
pretty
to
similar
stand
to what
up.
it has been, I think, at this
I
point.
know.
So last night on Medical Mondays, Black Tuna was on with Rory. That was kind of cool to talk to him a little
Is that
bit.
who those people were?
Yeah, he was. He had a reasonable kind of appreciative perspective on the emerging industry in Florida and all the work they've done to make it more tolerable, from starting off with like just being really stupid.
He's
Originally
an
to have it-
industry guy.
Yeah,
Black
having-
Tuna, by the way, for our listeners, is an industry name for Robert Platsorn, a very famous smuggler. Please go ahead.
Yeah, very cool dudes. Done a lot of great stuff. But this company down there is really hooking them up, so he's very favorable toward them, which is fine. I mean, they don't have to be bad people to be a big company, but
Well, he's a perfect pitch man. I mean,
yeah,
he's
man. And of course, he did the Silver tour,
Silver Tour.
and he did the infomercial style, which got a lot of attention. A lot of people like informed on the issue and all that kind of stuff. So very cool. He was a little bit off on the sales tax scenario for the stores down there. There is no excise tax for medical down there, but there is 6% sales tax.
But he knew how many
Yeah.
dispensaries they owned. I noticed Jamie
80
chuckled when he said that.
87 in Florida
Yeah,
or something like that.
So, I'm
Trulieve?
sorry. I love the guy, and I'm bringing him up for my events.
I forgot the name of this. I forgot the name of the place
Trulieve.
actually.
Trulieve is the sponsoring the Black Tuna brand.
Yeah.
of
That's
cannabis.
it. That's it. Then,
Wait.
yeah. That's-
When you're talking about a dispensary and they're one and they got 80 strong, they are the player. They're not just one of many. They run.
They
this
position
job,
themselves pretty well for the Florida situation.
and
that's
they
for
So I'm
can
gonna-
pull Florida.
tell you right now, there was an article out today where Loom said our goal is to have 100 dispensaries
100
open in
stores.
Michigan by the end of this year. So you're speaking about Trulieve, but you may as well be speaking about Loom. Go ahead.
Well, but the difference is that Trulieve hasn't made it to Michigan yet. And I might add that Loom hasn't gone to Florida yet.
Yep. I keep reading in magazines. I get all of the trade magazines, Cannabis, Business Times, the rest of them. And they talk about multi-state operators not wanting to come to Michigan because it's such an open licensing situation. There's no limit on licenses like they have in Florida or in Illinois. There's no high standard in order to achieve licenses at this particular point. Since we've dropped the financial requirements down, they're licensing a lot of people. Sort of
I said that. I said
better
the
than
same.
Oklahoma, but not as bad as Illinois. Go ahead.
Yeah, I said the same thing last night. They do have 10 other stores that are in states that are kind of not Michigan, but that are more open than that.
Right, but I mean, if you look at where they went and why they went there for strategic
they
reasons.
bought out another company.
Yes, sir.
Correct. And
Yes,
and
sir.
they're leveraging what they've done in Florida to get themselves set up in other states. I mean, this is a multi-state large industry operator. And if you think that they're also not trying to win the game, I let her win. If you think that they're not trying to win everywhere they go, I mean, that's their goal. These people were part of the restrictive licensing in Florida. They took full advantage of that. They're going into states where they're part of the restricted licensing there. And, they're everything that we always talk about. In the meantime, they're one of the few guys that are doing it somewhat correctly.
They're hooking up Robert Platsorn and people.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're
others.
taking care of someone I like.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he certainly has drank the Kool-Aid and he believes everything they're saying. And you
he's,
can
and
tell
he's
that.
very appreciative of the incremental changes based on the experiences he's had in the past and where
Right.
they came from. And,
And,
I get it. I don't like that being an excuse not to move forward. Obviously, I mean, that's,
no, I know. And I liked his response when I brought up the black market. You would have thought that I introduced him to Satan.
He didn't really care for the black market all of a sudden. This famous.
Yeah, I think that's hysterical that these guys. I mean, I love the guy because he was a smuggler, not because he's a nice guy. You know,
he was pretty cool and insightful on many things, and some of those stories were pretty intense for his experiences, obviously. And
yeah, did Rory talk very much about Arborside?
No,
no.
He said about 6 words.
Yeah, he did the show before a little bit, but there's still stuff in the courts, and he has to stop at a certain point in the discussions.
It was somewhat nice, Rick. You missed it. There was a nice spread of Rory on his bed, all laid out. And at the beginning of the show, every once in a while, he would pull his leg up, and I couldn't tell if there was I have to go back and watch the show. Couldn't tell if there was an ankle bracelet attached or not.
I don't think so.
But
yeah,
yeah,
I want to imagine.
Rory hung out in the hotel bed again. Seems to be his.
Okay.
And of course, Adam showed an incriminating picture of him, but he didn't catch what it was.
No, I showed it in the last show too. He had no idea that was him.
Hey, so before I get to some other stuff, I want to mention, and Alan Peisner, I first saw it from Alan Peisner posting it in Safer Mish, about how on another case, in a 5-page opinion directly from Justice Thomas, obviously the U.S. Supreme Court case, wrote as related to the case. I guess it wasn't successful, but said that in Gonzalez v. Rake, which is the case that said it doesn't matter what the states do if the Fed because of interstate commerce rules and laws and stuff. If the feds want to enforce federal law on cannabis activity, they can. I mean, they've been defunded and haven't chosen necessarily to be as strong in states that are allowing it and stuff. But that particular decision was based upon their ability to continue to do that. Based on that, what Justice Thomas pointed out is in the case of where this came out of California, I think that's 6th district or 9th district, 6th. All the activity took place that was in reference to this inside the state line. So he's saying, Congress doesn't have oversight over that because that had nothing to do with interstate commerce. Well, it all took place within the state lines.
And
that really wasn't an interstate issue.
Well, that's been my argument for years, is that they keep threatening us with the feds. No matter what group you go to, they say, hey, we can't do that because we accept federal money.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's ever threatened to take away your federal money. You're just using that as an excuse.
Especially a lot of colleges and universities who
correct.
say that.
And then you have local law enforcement who will tell you, they did it in my case. Oh, I can't give you your marijuana back. It's illegal federally. But you're not a federal officer.
Yeah. Well, we got the decision in Terbeek versus Wyoming, which said that local communities couldn't use federal exemption when creating ordinances, and by extension, that means they shouldn't be able to use federal exemption in order to overrule state law when it comes to things like this. We've not seen a whole lot of that, I think, here in Michigan too much. Although we have seen the feds come in and zap people like poor Danny Trevino. We again got a horrible decision in Danny's case.
The state fed him to the feds, so to speak. Because
tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. Was he just in the gray area for a long time?
Yeah, if you want to call it that, but he successfully defended himself at each time he was, charged and brought in front of a court and a jury. So the story goes anyway. They turned him over to federal law, which did not recognize the arguments that he was using to not be convicted under state law.
Yeah, and what Danny did is the same thing Jamie did, and Jim did, and I did. We all had regular places, and Adam, well before medical, was probably, he may not admit to it, but probably, in the same kind of an industry as well. So
I'll admit to anything.
Yep. Yeah. But the feds came in and the state tried over and over and over to get Danny, and they never could because Danny had state law on his side. So they finally said, "Feds, come take this guy off of our shoulders," and that's what they did.
But in fairness to the state, Danny was quite an asshole about it, and he thumbed his nose at them pretty hard.
Well, and I thought he had more than one dispensary.
Yeah, he did.
He had up to 5.
He had up to 5 dispensaries, and I know that Jamie didn't have 5, and I didn't have 5.
I did. We did with Big Daddies.
But
You had 5? Yeah.
his attitude was his biggest problem because personally, I believe, let me state it that way. I believe that by behaving the way he did, he pissed off individuals. Those individuals are the ones that said to their buddies at the federal level, hey, fuck this guy. We're tired of him. We got him hemmed up 6 ways from Sunday, and he keeps beating us, and then he thumbs his nose at us. So here, we're going to give them to you on a silver platter. And they do. And you have to understand, that's part of law enforcement. When I left prison, they informed me that if I was caught with a gun again, it was a 5-year federal penalty, mandatory minimum. And I said to the cop, I said, but I'm not going to get busted by the feds. I'm going to get busted by a state cop. So why would you turn me over to the feds? And that's the game they play, because in the state of Michigan, they can only put you back in for another 2 years, but they can threaten you with turning you over to the federal government.
Yep.
You know, and it's just a game.
So I don't know the exact charges, but he was selling cannabis out of a store, and there's probably conspiracy, manufacturing, delivering, whatever,
Running a criminal enterprise,
possessing.
We talked about RICO with Danny, but I don't know how far that went.
So what I'm trying to figure out, was it mainly because he never went through the licensing process?
Yeah, this is all before the licensing process existed, prior to 2016.
Oh, so he was being charged with something this was a case that'd been long going okay, got it. Okay, got it. Okay.
Well, he just lost his appeal, so that sucks. And one of the attorneys involved, a very awesome attorney named Stuart Friedman. He also was the one who caught this opinion that Alan Peisner posted, and he gave credit to him for that. And they had very reasonable arguments, but it's a tough task. Usually are not successful under those circumstances.
In federal court, they just simply don't allow any evidence based on the state law. They consider only federal law. So even though you could have been 100% within your rights, state-based, all of that goes out the window. We did the same thing for Jerry Duvall. We followed that trial. We tried so hard to get Jerry Duvall some leniency in the federal court system, and there was none. And that poor man has been behind bars now, Jamie, for way too long.
Man, there was just some discussion too about a month or so ago about trying to get him out. Health issue. They were letting a lot of people out, but I haven't heard anything more about it. I haven't followed up, but now that I kind of thought about that, I'm going to see what's happening. I'm assuming no news means that he's not necessarily that much closer. Yeah.
It'd be terrible for us to talk about federal prisoners without mentioning Ryan Basor. Of course, Basor, good friend of this show. Redemption Cannabis is a sponsor. But Ryan served 3 years in federal prison for state legal activity, the same thing we've just described. Jim, Jamie, myself, Danny Trevino, Ryan Basor, we were all part of that gray market industry. And certain people got punished more harshly than others. It's just, who knows? Who knows why? Who knows why?
Location might have something to do with it. I think the outskirts, the non-populated area where the state police kind of control things more than local police.
Well, it had to do with the prosecutors' perspective on whatever county that the activity took place in. Obviously, in Oakland County, that was not a safe bet.
No, Oakland County was
clear. Washtenaw County, though, Mackey, even though he didn't really support it, he didn't necessarily find it to be a priority. Go ahead, Jim.
They threw some people at you in the dispensaries that maybe came in with faulty IDs or things like that, just to kind of test and sting and possibly catch somebody doing something wrong. And
we had some of that.
Yeah, and that was something you always had to be aware of. And you just wonder how lenient some people were and how less lenient people were with IDs and whatnot back at that time when it was kind of the Wild West.
Well, in Oakland County, Clinical Relief was raided. Big Daddy's was raided. They raided Everybody's Cafe. And what was the other place associated with that, Jamie?
There was around the same time, there was a place in Macomb County
Yeah.
that got raided, and there was also shortly thereafter was the pier, the Dryden.
Dryden. Yep,
Right.
I know. So when you start talking about that right along that same time period, and then let's talk about the different things they did in Lansing, the way that they treated the Jackson County Compassion Club with some negative attention too. So there was a time when it was very, very dangerous to be in this game, and much to Adam's point, during the time when probably people should have had their head down and said, hey, you know what? I exist by the grace of the prosecutor only, that he doesn't come in and jackboot me down. Danny Trevino was sort of a brash, kind of a two fingers straight up kind of a guy. And that kept him in the crosshairs of law enforcement a lot longer than some of the rest of us. And maybe that's a cautionary tale for all of those other people who are still running in the unregulated market, who maybe are a little out front when maybe they should be a little bit back though.
Isn't it crazy that I've thought about this, is I don't know how else to say it, but like, we all have that same attitude of like, let me do what I'm doing, fuck off. But you kind of have to know how to kiss ass, not kiss ass, but I mean, a lot of places go out of their way to befriend but I guess Ryan Basor went out of his way to befriend the cops and befriend the town, and didn't really work for him either. So
well, but now we have, it's even worse now, and not to bring up a sore subject, but now we have our friends and neighbors and people who look like us and smoke like us. Now we have them calling up and saying, hey, listen, I invested all this money in this license, and there's this group down the street who just has the approval of the local government to do what they're doing. And I don't appreciate that. So now, it's a whole different game. And I'm waiting for the point, and I thought we were almost there, where government's going to say, we have this industry to regulate. And if you're not working within the industry, we can't regulate you, because we can only regulate the industry. And it's no longer a crime anywhere else. And that's the day I'm waiting, because I know there are guys with warehouses with thousands of plants and no licenses. And they're not a threat to anybody.
It's just cannabis.
Right.
Yeah. Well, snitching happens in every industry.
Hey, hopefully Amie comes on soon. Before she does, Rick, would you go over what the most latest bulletin from the department was concerning the allocation of the funds for veteran research?
Yeah, in fact, I have that up on my email right here. Let me look at it. We've, of course, allocated $40 million to go towards veterans and PTSD research using cannabis during the 2018 legalization ballot proposal. They allocate 20 million of it one year, 20 million of it the next year. We originally intended Dr. Sue Sicily and her research group to receive that fund, but they put it through some kind of an approval process with a 3-person award committee. They've determined 2 different groups, that'd be Wayne State University and the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, also known as MAPS. They will receive that award, about $7 million going to Wayne State University, which is all that they'd ask for, and all the rest of the 20 going to MAPS, which is about 3/4 of what they'd ask for. So those 2 things are being funded by the money that we put into the system right now. And although I'm happy,
year of this, right?
Happy we're going to be doing some research on veterans and PTSD, but I would like to hear from Dr. Sicily about her feeling about where this money went, because originally this is what we wanted, and we were prevented from specifically designating a target for the funds by lawyers, so it makes sense that we that this has ended up happening. But I'm not sure that I'm super happy about it.
Rick,
Yeah,
I think every few minutes you should try to say the word interdisciplinary again, just to see how high you are as we go forward.
Interdisciplinary. Yeah, I'll sing it. Actually.
Everybody will get a chance to try to say it, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yep, we must stop the war on caregivers. It's absolutely true. And of course, the war takes place not just in Lansing, but in every municipality. We see more and more, over and over, communities enacting regulations on a local level that affect those people even more than state regulations do.
Someone's got a mic moving around a lot or something.
Someone typing or tapping?
Keyboard.
Oh.
Someone typing? It's not me. The fickleness of technology.
Yes.
Someone has a
Government
mouse
guy.
in their computer.
It's the
I love-
government guy.
Like a live mouse
Yes.
going around.
That
I
would be
love
cool.
the mouse on the computer.
Amy's the culprit.
It's Amy.
Oh, no.
Still,
Is that better?
maybe. I'm not sure.
No, everything's great. We just got quiet for some reason to gaze at you while you adjust yourself to make you feel totally
Holding
comfortable.
conversation
I've been
to listen
gazing
for the
since you got
stretching.
here.
Gazers.
A bunch of old gazers.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're happy to have Amie Carter with us. How you doing, Amie?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey now.
Hola.
Hello, hello.
Look at that. Amie worked with, most recently, done a lot of things over the years, actually, and but has most recently worked with My Compassion to get started getting a bill introduced via Representative Garza's office, and it would remove the restrictions necessary to allow for pediatric patients to use their cannabis medicine on grade school grounds, which is something that often has to happen with Amy's son, Jayden, who is the namesake of this bill. And Amy's kind of spearheading this project at this point. And My Compassion was big in it for a little bit, but then has put together an extended group, which includes other advocacy groups, including the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association with Robin and Ida, who've been working on this issue for many years themselves. And so it's a good joining of forces, and hoping to really do something with this. But please, Amie, explain the bill, how we got there. And what's going on.
All right. Well, we have been working on the draft. This is our first draft, and it was from about 1.5 years ago. The reason that it started is because Jayden's school is fully aware that he takes cannabis oil, and they will call me and say, hey, can you bring a special medicine up? And, I always do, but in abiding by the law, I guess, you have to park 1,000 foot away from the school grounds. And then I have to walk in, sign him out of class. The classroom gets interrupted because he gets called down to the office. And then I have to walk him 1,000 foot back out to the car in order to hand him a capsule that he swallows. And then I can, of course, drive him onto school property, and then I walk him back in and sign him in. Well, a lot of parents don't have the ability to, leave work every day or, to drive up to their child's school. And I just feel it's time that they have access, just like a pharmaceutical, while they're at school. It's his medicine. And of course, it will be a non-smokable form. The kids aren't going to be smoking blunts in the office or anything. But it is non-smokable. Illinois, they have Ashley's Law, and Maureen is actually on our committee, and that is Ashley's mom, and they got it approved in 2018. There are several other states, Colorado, Florida, Maine, New Jersey, Washington, and then, of course, Illinois. So we would be the 7th state to have some type of legislation to allow that. And we are currently in the Education Committee. It was introduced into the House on May the 8th, and they forwarded it to the Education Committee. So now it's in the hands over there. We have to urge the Education Committee to put it up for a hearing back at the House. And then at that time, when that does happen, which hopefully it will be, let's say, September, October, because that would be nice. We will need parents that are willing to testify in Lansing. So if you know of somebody that has a minor patient, there are, as of July 5th, there are 293 minor patients in the state of Michigan. Please have them contact me if they are willing to support this in any way. If they want to give testimony, write letters, please have them get a hold of me. And I can give you my phone number, and it is 810-368-8568. And just have them reach out to me, or Facebook or email, however they want, because we are looking for people to testify eventually.
Would you, sorry, repeat that number again?
The phone number is 810-368-8568.
Now, Amie, this particular broadcast is featured on the Roku television station for Cannabis Pro Media and goes international. If you have people that would like to participate beyond the borders of Michigan, is there a way for them to also be able to submit supporting information either via a letter, a video, or perhaps during a Zoom version of that meeting?
Yes, definitely. I would have them give me a call on that number, or I also have a website. It's called jaydenslaw.com, and there's some contact information there as well.
Would you spell jaydenslaw.com, please, because it's a unique spelling?
Yes, it is JAYDENSLAW.com.
Thank you.
Yep.
The
And
unique.
Go ahead, please, Adam.
Oh, I was just going to say the unique thing about this, and you know, obviously we all support what Amy's doing, and this is one of those ridiculous things that we have to deal with. But the wild thing about this is what Amie described sounds like a dope deal, where the kid is leaving the school grounds to go secure their fix in order to then go back and enjoy the rest of their day. And
And the
it's
kid's
not
and
anything
the
but
kid is
that.
seen by everybody else. It's like a
Right,
spectacle.
right. And it's anything but that. And what kills me is I was one of those kids, believe it or not, who, when I was in school, they forced that Ritalin down my throat. And they used to have it in the building under lock and key. I mean, this stuff's deadly, and they're giving it to children.
Right.
And with parental permission, of course, and doctor's approval. But this substance, they're just, and it doesn't make sense because they're not denying the kid access to school while on cannabis. They're just saying you can't ingest it here, which makes it ridiculous.
Yeah. It hasn't been that long since my kids were in school, and I recall that if there was a medicine that needed to be administered, you had a form to fill out. As long as it wasn't a narcotic, you had a form to fill out. If you had 2 aspirins that you wanted to give them at 1 o'clock, they allowed you to put that, and then someone would administer. I'm not sure exactly how it worked at that point. I'm not sure that it works that way anymore, considering how the laws are. But it seems to me like a simplistic formula like that. Please administer 1 pill at 2 p.m. That seems pretty simple to follow.
Amie, would it be the school nurse, or could it be a teacher? Is that stuff specified, or is it just per the regular, policy of the school?
It is pretty much per the policy of the school. However they handle the pharmaceuticals is how it would be handled with medical marijuana. And in talking with kind of what Adam was saying is, I feel like these kids, are kind of being in a way discriminated against because, when a child is going through a debilitating condition enough to warrant them to have a medical marijuana card, the last thing that we want them to feel is to be singled out and to be different from the other kids. And, so I think that that pulls on my heartstrings because I know that, my son, he's 14, so he understands the legality because of, what I do. But, if he didn't understand that, he would be like, well, Mom, why do I have to leave to take my medicine? Why do I have to go outside? And, and he might be shameful of his medicine that he should be very proud of because it's natural.
Other kids are so they look at anything that makes you different in order to harp on that, in order to bully. That's what school is. And when you have to go outside to see mommy every day because you got to take your special pill, that sounds like a lot of stuff that people could use to bully somebody with. You don't want kids to feel outsider. You don't want them to feel like they're abnormal. Make it.
This may sound strange coming from me, Mr. Hashbash, but I got 4 kids, and you're not it doesn't make you the cool kid because you get to use cannabis in school. Okay. That's not your medical use of cannabis isn't something that you're going to celebrate. The fact that you have this special permission is your way of life, and for the school to impede on that or single you out in any way, shape, or form, it's just it goes against everything they're trying to teach these kids nowadays, because they're certainly not trying to teach them how to read and write and do their arithmetic.
Or much logic or science as it
Right.
so it seems by
I
the, a
mean,
lot of the
it's
adults.
funny because while
I mean,
they're social engineering, they're doing a very poor job of it in some aspects.
Well, I think, there are just more changes with laws, more education, take away the fear. Mom and dad aren't going to be worried about it and pass it on to their kids, so their kids then pass it on to their classmates. I think it's all just, it's all education, and we're seeing slowly those pillars of that stigma collapse and crumble. So it's happening. It's taking time. And Amie, good for you, and best with everything that you're doing for children all around
Amie,
the world.
have you come up against any resistance in this? I mean, I know the law itself was. We lost.
well, she'll have to come
That's
back.
what happens when you talk to people, Adam.
I know, man. They just,
saying.
Wait, I'll go away. Maybe I'll come back and
I think it's the government
no
does
longer
that so
either.
that people I speak to. I don't know.
Yeah, by the way, Mike Young is a comedian. Is that correct?
Yes, Mike Young is a comedian with a podcast I would recommend you all check out.
I remember.
I grew up with him. He's a hell of a guy, funny dude. So, Amie, I was going to ask you, have you come up against any resistance other than the law itself?
No, not really. Everybody's been very receptive to it. I mean, at first, like, you get the uneducated people that are like, what? That's never going to happen. Or, oh, they're going to smoke at school, or,
Oh, that's another question I have. Does Jayden's law specifically prevent smoking?
It says non-smokable.
Right. So topicals or ingestibles, essentially.
probably necessary to pass, even if you could make the argument that that is the delivery system that works. And that will be the case sometimes, because that is the fastest way to get everything.
Necessary to pass seems to be an acceptable version of stuff I don't like, but I get it.
Well, we feel the same way too.
No, I get it. I mean, as a severe asthmatic, it sure would have been nice to be able to take a couple tokes in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, and if we can help 60% of the people, even though we can't help 100% of the people.
But no kid should suffer. So obviously, anything we can do to move the ball forward.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Amie, I've been on some of the recent meetings. Obviously, Rick and I are also, trying to contribute as much as we can to help out in support of this too. And you've spoken more recently with the offices of Garza. Some of the staff and things like that. Is there discussion or a chance that we look at this as something that has to go very shortly after session is reconvened, and hopefully by itself, similar to what the Delta 8 issue did, so that there's enough time for it to be actually used for part of the school year, and it doesn't get left vulnerable to many of the changes that we know some forces are trying to make that we don't want to see happen. Additional restrictions, additional burdens on people, and so forth.
Yes, that's really what we're shooting for, is to, as soon as they get back in session, we're really going to urge them to get that hearing and try to get it passed without it being, much changed at all. It's a very kind of a simple bill, if you will, if there is a thing. But yeah, we're trying to get it so we can implement it as soon as possible, so these kids can access their medicine this school year.
Right. There is a issue with it that is being looked at, and it's a there's a provision in which there has to be an educational seminar or system somehow provided to those who are going to be administering the cannabis, but there is no other information provided with it. There's no time frame. There's no mandate for it to happen at a certain time. It does have to happen before the program can start. So this is one of those things that somebody could use as the basis for kicking the can or never actually getting it started unless that were to get cleared up.
But that could be as simple as reviewing a online video, correct?
It could be, yes.
Defined,
yeah,
is it? Yeah. So it could be.
If it's not defined, I'm saying.
It's not defined. And we talked about putting like an amendment, I believe, to saying that it can go into effect immediately, and this has to be done within so many days or something, because we don't want it to get passed and governor sign it and us get excited and then, still go 3 to 6 months without kids having access. So
Well,
we're definitely taking that into consideration.
That could be
if school
created
boards have
before,
to,
I was
I'm
just
sorry,
going to
Adam,
say
go
that
ahead.
could be created before the law even passed.
Yeah. I mean, if school boards have to approve a training regimen for administering of medical marijuana, no school board's going to make that a priority.
No, the
They'll
state would
drop the
have to
right
do
off.
that. I would think the state would have to approve whatever education process is required for that and for those individuals.
Mhm.
And I would think just
We
like
need to
driver's
streamline
ed
that.
nowadays, everybody would get the same little education. I would think you could do it easily on the State Board of Education's website. It could be monitored so that we knew who had gotten the training and who was now able to dispense medications in the schools.
Yeah, I think it should just get started, like immediate effect, and then say, then you have to put this program in,
Mhm.
So that way
Yeah.
there's nobody holds this up, and it is probably fair and offer some guidance, so good.
Well, let's in that case produce a video and say you must watch this 30-minute video, or you have to view this 3-page flyer that we've put together with information and pictorial diagrams and all of that thing stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah, but not all schools have nurses though, so sometimes the person administering that might be
the
a
person
teacher.
administering.
Yeah, we put the social worker, the nurse, or I think basically the person that does the pharmaceuticals. Because sometimes the special needs teachers will do that if they're in a contained type classroom. If they're in the general ed setting, typically they go to the office.
I know it's the secretary at my children's school.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
there's
So
usually
whoever it
one-
is, that's
30
gonna
years and
identify
runs the school.
Yeah. One of the anything you want that you go through that person. I know that
That's right.
that keystone individual that everything seems to be based upon that no one appreciates fully. Right.
That's right.
So, Amy, there's 2 parts, 2 different bills actually associated with this process. One's the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act amendment that we discussed, which requires supermajority to pass. When we say we don't want to leave it vulnerable, when you have a supermajority for the bill, it's a concern. Anytime it gets opened, this is for a positive reason that we all support. If that's a concern. And then the other bill is in the education code. It changes the things necessary in there. How is that process? Are there people within the education world that are in opposition?
Not that I know of on the level, I guess, that I'm on. I've talked to a lot of different teachers and principals about this subject, and they aren't against it at all. But we are amending the 1976 school code, and that is why it got transferred to the education committee, which, I see it as being, an education, obviously, because it's at a school, but at the same time, it's kind of a medical issue as well. So we were trying to bypass that education committee, and there wasn't really a way around it.
Amy, talk about who the committee chairman is on the education committee, and also who's the representative sponsoring your bill. Give some credit to that person.
Alex Garza is sponsoring the bill, and he actually just got voted in as mayor. He ran for mayor, and he did get it. So he's going to be joining the, being a mayor. But there's still going to continue. His office is going to still continue to work on this bill. So I did contact them about that, and Pamela Hornberger is the education committee head chairperson, and I have emailed her directly. I didn't hear anything back. I did I emailed all of them on the committee. The committee is made up of, I think, 9 different state representatives that serve on the education committee. So each of those representatives, they are state representatives. So please, if you have a child and you support this, reach out to your representative, especially if he or she is on the education committee. I heard back from a few of them, and they were in support of it. I would say out of the 9, I got 4 people in support, which they were all Democrat, but that's as much as I really know about the education committee, other than I am supposed to be meeting with another lady, Ida, and meeting with Pamela Hornberger, hopefully in person in September.
Now, Hornberger she's a Republican. The Republicans control the House, which means that they'll have a numerical superiority, 5 votes over 4, and they'll also control the chairmanship. So the chair decides which bills are considered. So hopefully you can work with Representative Pamela. I'm sorry, her last name I didn't get correctly.
Say your last name again, Amie, just for fun. Okay.
Yeah.
See,
Again, Jamie.
government. It's the government.
She's not scared. She looked over at Adam, and then
Orensberger, I think, is what it is. So when
Adam,
we want
once again, it's Adam.
I know. Well, you're a convenient target since you're already crippled up a little bit and you can't move quickly. So yes.
There's just as
There's
happens
that.
quite
Whoa.
often, there's just a connection issue.
So-
sometimes.
Hello, sorry, I'm back.
What was
Rick
that?
was
Rick's
asking you to
name?
pronounce the name of the head of the committee.
It's Hornberger.
Hornberger.
Kayla
Okay.
Hornberger.
So it
For some
during
reason,
See why
it
you hung
reminds
up.
me of the Ace Ventura movie, like the Finkelstein, or I don't know. Like that's what I think of. Every time I say it, I think about that movie.
The Finkelstein shit kid.
Well, you can tell Hornberger if they only let one bill through on weed, it should be yours.
Right.
They can
And-
I
they
agree.
can block all the rest, and we'd be good with that.
So my point about bringing up the chairman's name is that if you wanted to direct correspondence, like writing a letter or sending an email, that would be the person to direct it toward. Although Mr. Garza, Representative Garza, seems to sponsor the bill, it's really the chairman who decides which ones are considered and which ones are not. That's where the pressure should be applied. I'm glad to hear that Amie and Ida Pearl-Lee from the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, wonderful person, great advocate, also a mother of a sick child. And one of those persons whose testimony helped get us to where we're at right now. And
Yeah, I have worked on this issue and related issues for a long time.
Yep, that's true. So you have a great team of people to work with, and she's very familiar with the legislature because that's part of her job. So that should be good. I hope that that resolves some issues and maybe gets your bill considered more quickly than it would have been otherwise.
And of course, sometimes this process is very frustrating and different negotiations get entered into and certain things don't work out and it doesn't pass, even though it's ridiculous that it doesn't, and we go into next session. But I think this has got to pass. If this not this session, it has to next session.
It's true that sometimes it takes the bill multiple times of being introduced before it actually becomes successful. Took us 3 times trying to get legalization. Took us 3 times with what was originally called the local option bill, which eventually became the MMFLA. So it is sometimes a long road.
I'd like to see Jayden be able to use the bill that has his name on it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Do it while he's still a school kid.
Well,
I can do that. I know. That's so wise, Adam. Good job. Amie, tell us a little bit more about Jayden, since we've talked so much about him, but haven't really talked at all about him.
Okay. Well, he is 14 now. He is 5'7",
And you are how tall?
He is,
He towers over you.
5'1.5".
Yeah, baby.
What was that?
That was slightly creepy. Sorry
he's
about
doing
that.
really well. I
Sorry.
didn't even hear you guys.
Good.
Oh, wow. You're very
You
charitable.
know, I like it when the son is taller than his mother. As a kid that was 6'4", it was a big deal in my family when I became taller than everybody else. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
You had him at the last meeting. He was around, so you brought him on the meeting for a minute. He definitely towers over you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how long has he been ill, and how well is he adapting to school? And talk a little bit about the road that brought you here, because I know it hasn't always been an easy one.
Right. Yeah. No, we struggled for a lot of years. Jayden was violent and aggressive, and he was on a slew of pharmaceuticals that really had more side effects than anything, and it didn't really help him, fully. Nothing I've really found. I mean, we were in therapy. I've done a realm of different things, and nothing seemed to help as much as cannabis oil. Cannabis oil has increased his IQ. His IQ has increased. His cognitive impairment is gone. He's no longer considered cognitively impaired. Like it,
Yeah.
it just
That's
it
awesome.
changed his brain. He talks about it. He talks openly about it, and it's cute to hear like the things that he has to say on what cannabis does do for him. And we still have days. It's not a cure. And we actually just had this discussion with him yesterday. He's like, it's not a cure, Mom. And I'm like, I know it's not a cure, but it's the best tool. And if he decides, what, I'm not taking my medicine today, well, it's going to be a tough day. When he does take his cannabis oil, we have a great day. He's happy. He's kind. He laughs. He is more creative. He feels more comfortable in his own skin. When he refuses to take his medicine, his OCD is worse. His anxiety is high. And then he's like, yeah, you're right, Mom. I do need to take it every day. I'm like, yeah, I told you that.
Yeah, 14-year-old boys don't always listen to their mom, though.
Mom, I guess you're right. I do need to use cannabis every day.
Listen, when you know everything, it's hard to listen to other people.
That's true.
I mean,
Young boys.
don't forget, boys get smarter as they get older, or no? Depends from what angle you're looking at it.
I don't know. I can't say
Which
that I was
particular brain you're talking about?
pretty that age. But Amie, in what you don't necessarily need to name the school district, but what part of Michigan does Jayden attend school in, and how long have you been with this particular school district?
The Flint area, and we actually live in Burton, and I don't mind saying the school district. It's Kersley Schools, and he has been there since he started school.
And have they ever given you an issue with his medicine?
No, they haven't, because they've seen the difference it made. His teacher wrote a letter to Lara when we were trying to get autism approved. I actually got a letter from his therapist, from Genesee Health Systems, and from his school, stating that they carefully wrote the letter, but it was very obvious on the changes that Mom made at home with the natural medication has made a huge difference in school and peer relationships and all of that. So
Now,
when
let me just for Amie, just for our people who may not understand some of the terms we're using, Lara's Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, which is the agency that used to be in charge of the medical marijuana program. And when you're talking about getting autism approved, that was an effort that moms and others entered into to try and get autism added to the list of qualifying conditions to utilize medical marijuana. That was a really rocky road too. But what you're talking about was hero stuff that you did back then, and you kind of glossed over pretty quickly, but you were pretty damn amazing. I'm just going to say it because I was around back then. I watched it.
Thank you. Yes, it was quite a bit of work to get that pushed through. But I had great people that had been trying for years before I got there. And I just, I've been very public with Jayden's story and my story because I didn't have a lot of help. I didn't know what to do. And we were living in very bad conditions. And I can honestly say that cannabis oil changed my son's life. It saved his life because he was going down a road that I would have not been able to parent him much longer, especially, being how tall he is now. So I had a lot of support from my.
We just lost Amie, but I want to point out something important. When she talks about Jayden's school has never had a problem with medicine because they've seen what difference it makes to him, remember that means every school administrator and principal and teacher has seen a success story about cannabis medicines. Oftentimes, it's impossible for people to break that drug war philosophy about cannabis being bad until they have a personal experience and they witnessed it with their own eyes. So when Jayden's setting a perfect example of how cannabis medicines help people in a school setting, all of the people that witnessed Jayden's improvement now believe in cannabis. And it's an important message, not just for him, but for the entire community. Those are the success stories that need to be shared. So thank you, Amie. In your absence, we were talking nice things about you, of course.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Except for Jamie, you know how he is.
Oh, of course.
I was being very mean and lashing out, and the abuse was unreal, but you fortunately missed it. We lost Shelly. She said she had to go, but it was cool to have her on for a while today. It's been a little while since she's joined us. She has reeds and weeds, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's Rids and Weeds is a great podcast where they smoke cannabis while talking about books that they've read, like a book club, but a little bit higher. So it's a fantastic podcast. Plus, she's been around for a long time too. But Amie, what else should we know about Jayden's Law? How best can people support it? And also talk a little bit more about your website.
All right. So my website pretty much has links on it, so you can research Ashley's Law. What is our law is kind of based off of Ashley's Law, which is in Illinois, and it also has some, just different information about the different organizations that are helping. And again, it is jaydenslaw.com. And then what was the other thing that you had asked? How people can support it.
Yeah.
Right now, you can reach out to me if you want to give any type of testimony or support, and I can guide you on who to, reach that out to. You can call your state representative, but it is in the education committee. So, you can reach out to the education committee. There's 9 people, and just call them and let them know that you support Jayden's Law. And that is House Bill 4797 and 4796. And let me just double check those numbers.
Amie, one question I have is, what does Jayden know about Jayden's Law? Does he understand what is happening and what we're doing, what we're trying to get done? I know he's 14, so I just...
Yes, he does know about Jayden's Law and what it is, and he's very excited about it and supportive of it. I will tell you one thing that Jayden is not a fan of is how public I was with how he was as a child. Now that he has matured and grown up and he does not have violent and aggressive behaviors anymore, he is very embarrassed, or and I posted like 10 videos on YouTube when I didn't know what else to do, and I'm like, I live this every day, I need help, and that really bothers him. And I try to explain to him that if nobody knows your struggle, they don't know what you've overcome, and that we've helped so many people with sharing our story, not just in the cannabis industry, but in the mental health care community. We have touched and embraced a lot of families, and I have helped a lot of children, and because of it, because of our public presence. But he is just not okay with that. So I think it's just going to take some time, and letting him know that he is he should be proud of what he has endured and dealt with and overcame.
Well,
in that
he's a
aspect.
superstar, and hopefully one day Jayden will be comfortable in telling his story from his point of view, and can include all those horrible things that his mother used to say about him, so
Correct.
that others know who he is and where he came from.
Yeah,
The fodder for future therapist appointments for Jayden is always.
and this
Right.
Because
and
he's
these,
a kid, he's also a teenager, and most teenagers like their privacy.
Right,
so that
we get that.
and they get weird about, even under normal circumstances, kind of
Right,
weird about
yeah.
like showing off old baby pictures and stuff like that. You add compound this very complex situation, intense situation. I'm sure it's
I'm just hoping that the day his name appears on the front page of the paper, because we got this thing through, that he's comfortable enough to come out,
Yeah.
Well, I think he's a teenager. Give the guy some time now. It's
Right.
going to be
No,
a
I
few
know.
years before he even appreciates, Amie, what you've done. It took me a long time to appreciate what my mom did, and she didn't have nearly the battle that you've had. And it's, eventually kids understand, I think.
Yeah.
And when Amie posts stuff on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, there's quite a few viewers at times, because that channel has been exposed through the Dr. Phil show and other large audiences, and you have quite a following. So it's which is good in terms of the reach and the education.
It
is.
And I'm getting ready to, start doing something with the YouTube channel, because we do have 30,000 subscribers right now. And I would love to use that to educate and touch more families. And speaking back about Jayden and the therapy appointments, see, I was thinking if we could do like a meet and greet with Snoop Dogg or something, he'd be like, no, don't you worry about that. You know, like you make him feel a lot better. He loves rap music and football. So I'm like, all right, there's some people in the cannabis industry that just needs to lay it down with them. No, don't be mad at your mom. You know.
Yeah. And there certainly are some people from the football field in the cannabis industry here in Michigan. Congratulations to Calvin Johnson for being inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And also, he's a great entrepreneur with this cannabis brand line Primitive, which he has with former Lion Rob Sims. That's a Michigan brand line. And they could have lived anywhere they wanted, and they chose to stay here to do this. Very happy with them. And maybe we can get them and Jayden together one time. Maybe next time Chung's in town, we'll try and do that too.
Yeah, that would be great.
If he was a hockey fan, I'm sure that Darren would be very happy.
Yes, he is a hockey fan, so that would be. You know, I'm just trying to cut down on these therapy appointments. We've had a lot of appointments since he was born.
Good mom, bad mom. Let's put them in the good mom pile, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Love
Yes.
that. Yeah. Anybody that meets Darren is a hockey fan afterwards. He's such a pleasant guy. I know. He's just a great guy to talk to. But Amie,
There he is.
thanks so much for joining us on Jazz Cabbage Cafe. It's been wonderful to have you here.
Yeah, if there's anything else you wanted to add before we wrap this up, please feel free. We'll show the website and stuff again.
All right. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you very much. And again, if there are minor patients, I would love to speak to their parents and gather more support. I have quite a few, but I need more. So that's my call out for today.
I hope that yields some great responses. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks a lot, Amie.
All right. I'm going to sign off here because my mic problems.
All good. Really appreciate it.
Take care. What a great segment. Of course, you know, we've known Amie for a long time. During that whole time with autism and even before, there's been a lot of years of her advocating for her son in one way or another. So, great person.
Some really tough challenges along the way.
I mean, it was years and years ago she was on Dr. Phil. I mean, that was, I'm going to say 14, right? And it's now 21. So you think about that. And it's true what she said, that there was a time when it looked like maybe she would not be able to continue to take care of Jayden because it was just too much physicality. So,
and that's the big part of her story, in my opinion, is that, you know, she rescued her child and found something that worked and did whatever she needed to do. And if you've known Jayden for any length of time, you've seen the improvement in just his social skills and his, you know, the minor connections some of us will have in meeting him.
No,
I mean,
so wonderful success story. Go ahead,
I
Jim.
just wanted to say, guys, you know, something I was thinking about, these parents that go well out of their way for their children's life and dignity and whatnot. These are the people that I think should be our leaders, you know, in Lansing and in all these cities. And these are the people that go out of their way to help others. And it's just amazing that the pushback they do get from lawmakers when they're doing such good for their family. And the roles should be switched, because the parents are the ones in this case that are looking out for humanity. And it just seems so backwards sometimes. If you think how long it takes to get shit done.
The decision-making process and the policy considerations we based around what's best for everybody, what works for everybody, not how much somebody happens to get, you know, or something like that. Yeah.
And the sad part is, when it comes to the politicians, you have to parade these people around. You know, the best thing that ever happened to cannabis was sick people. If we didn't parade sick people around some of these politicians, they would have never changed.
The AIDS patients in California had a lot.
Yeah,
to do.
that was huge.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Brownie Mary.
Dennis Perone did more to help marijuana than anybody that wrote a piece of legislation. You know,
when I think about parents in Michigan and their kids, I think about Ida We've talked about Ida Pearl Lee talking to the legislature. I think about 2 times at Hash Bash, one when Jim Powers and his son stood up and talked to the entire thousands of people. And I think of Steve Green. And if you know the story of baby Bree, when Steve Green lifted his daughter up over his head to the cheering roar of the crowd, most people who never met Steve knew who his daughter was because of the horrible things that Child Protective Services had done to take her away from him. So
when I was in prison, the meanest prison guard, the one that treated me the worst, that wrote me the most tickets, came up to me and discussed baby Bree with me because she had heard about that story. But I've been in this game a little longer than you folks, and I always like to point out May Nutt. May Nutt was one of these women who got up and told the story of her child, and her son had testicular cancer, and she ended up bringing him marijuana in the hospital and feeding him marijuana and all these she had all kinds of crazy stories. Police officers were dropping seized marijuana off in her mailbox. I mean, and she was an 80-year-old woman coming to Ann Arbor to speak at Hash Bash. And you know, that was long before we were close to passing any legislation. And she was going to the legislators and telling her personal story of what happened to her son, who eventually did die of cancer. But how going through the process and using marijuana, which all she ever talked about was the palliative care. Remember, we've come a long way in the marijuana game. It went from just being a way to make cancer patients eat food and AIDS patients eat food to we now know that THC itself kills cancer cells. So as the pendulum swung, the education came with it, and now we know a lot more than the things that people like May Nutt may have been discussing, or even our good friend Renee Emery. You know, Renee was stuck on CBD. I don't know that she ever discussed anything other than THC and CBD.
Oh, she used to say to me, anandamide, brother, anandamide. She was a big believer in it. That's a neurotransmitter, anandamide, and it's one of the things that
we did a big day of
cannabis.
Of individual interviews and video shots like 10, 11 years ago at Third Coast. And she was there amidst many people, and that's exactly what she chose to talk about for that.
Adam, I'll tell you what, I've heard Chuck Ream talk about May Nutt previously, but I hadn't heard the story the way that you told it before. Thank you for sharing
Nice history, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have one of my prized possessions is a handwritten note from May Nutt. I had given her, you may see them on some of my hats. I have these silver marijuana leaf pins that a big jeweler in Ann Arbor made. And I gave her one once, and then she would contact me and want to give them to nurses and doctors and stuff because it was this faint lapel pin you could wear that wasn't this big thing saying weed, you know. And, I have a handwritten note from her, and that's one of my prized possessions in all the collectibles that I have. Because to me, she was huge, and nobody knew who she was. You know, small town. I can't remember the town. Ida.
Maybe. Like it.
I mean, just like
Ida, maybe.
And yeah.
Papa.
Actually, maybe is right near Ida. Those are the truth.
But I mean, the movement certainly now has people who have come forward because they wanted to help their sick and dying. We know that, and it's certainly a lot easier to come forward now. I always point out that I got involved because I was married to a woman that had a good job, and I worked in a family business, and my reputation could go to pot and nobody would be hurt by that. Mm-hmm. You know, not everybody could afford to step out. They might have lost their job. Their parents might have thrown them out of the house.
You can take a few blows to your reputation and it doesn't really change much.
Yeah. If I can add, you know, one of the most gratifying things, you know, in the days of working in a dispensary and helping people when medical was the focus, you know, you'd have parents come in with their children and they were at their wits' end, and they had all these other, you know, drugs they were given, prescription pharmaceuticals that made their kid all of a sudden have Tourette's syndrome or some other side effect that was harmful. And to see them over the course of time and the changes, it's the most gratifying thing working in a dispensary. And I'm always like kind of saddened by the fact the adult use has really overtaken that medical focus we used to have. And I know I've said it before, but I really want that to come back so people can get help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oftentimes in the rush to capture a dollar, people just forget that there are individual stories out there. We're more than just a registered tape, more than just a receipt for sale purchase.
Well, I would argue that the marijuana game is so big that medical should be like a side note. It should be well taken care of. It should be well supplied. It should be looked after by the recreational market, because it is what it is. It's the savior. It's the giving plant. It should be respected in that way. And you know, companies like Jamie's dispensary, the
Botanical Company.
The Botanical Company, sorry. I mean, their concept of always giving this medical, always having this medical bent to their
Well, prepared to help people who need that information. Yeah.
I mean, that I appreciate that. I mean, you know, again, I tell people that was there was no lying when well, yeah, we lied. We said that wasn't our foot in the door, but the truth was it was our foot in the door, because we were dealing with some real stubborn people, and they needed to be shown. I mean, they needed to see people like Mike McShane. Okay, they needed to see that. That was rough to see. They needed to see that. That had to make a difference to some people at some time. And there were people, I know there were activists who came on board because they were able to offer palliative care, not realizing that had they got at it sooner, they may have actually been able to reverse some of the symptoms in some of the situations.
We've seen some pretty amazing things. That's
right. We're now 10, 20 years down the line from that, and we know a lot more. And with what we know now, I'm going to tell you, the medical market's a very small market, but it should be very well taken care of. Kind of like the luxury car industry.
Yeah, don't hurt anything caregivers are doing. You know,
I think when we talk about commodities, we find that there's mainstream commodities and there's specialized things. There are grocery stores that have meat departments, but then there are also specialty meat vendors. I imagine that there will be a time when there are dispensaries or recreational retail centers that specialize in the medical aspect of it and have people that can handle your questions, but that they might be, you know, the exception as opposed to the rule. It might be asking a bit much to expect people who probably rotate through their jobs quite regularly to keep up on the medical things. And you really need to trust who's speaking to you. And I think having a specialist medical retailer makes sense. Always has to me. You know, I don't want people to lose opportunities to shop medically, but I also think I don't need to take medical advice from some kid who still has pimples. I'm sorry. Maybe that's rude, but if you're so young that you just got in the game and all you know is what your general manager told you, then I'm not trusting you to give me medical advice, brother. I'm not. So that was good emphasis.
That was timely.
Sorry, I was looking something up and I hit the wrong button.
You hit that again. That was good.
Yeah, that was the W.S. Walcott Medicine Show. But I was looking for that name, actually. And that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the medicine man, the guy that pulls into town with his cart of goodies. And he's got the most amazing medicinal marijuana products you've ever seen, because he's allowed to create what he knows is out there. And yeah, there might be a little bit of that, you know, showmanship going on and some, you know,
fancy packaging,
maybe a little here and there, but it's cannabis. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to do what the medicine man used to do and sell you a little vial of nothing.
So one of the things that we're talking about here is essentially the stratification of cannabis. Is cannabis used for medicinal qualities different than cannabis used for recreational qualities? That leads us to a kind of a side discussion about taxation of cannabis based on THC content. We know that in some states they've tried to put additional tax on higher THC concentration items, or perhaps
Illinois.
the THC concentration you can have in some products. Go ahead, Jamie.
I just said Illinois, I think, either does that or has seriously discussed it.
Right.
Maybe
So
Jim
that was
knows it.
was also mentioned in an article I read recently about some of the things being hypothesized for federal regulatory framework, where they penalize people who choose to use higher concentrations of cannabis. And of course, we've seen something really stupid like in Colorado, where they've decided that all concentrates have to be delivered in a single-use package. Can you imagine a single-use package of dab? I mean,
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, I've seen them. I mean, that's what they do now.
That's so stupid.
A lot of waste
So
of
ridiculous.
packaging, it sounds like. For
It
sure.
is.
It is.
It is. And it just shows the one thing I harp on over and over and over and over, that people making these rules have no concept
No idea.
of what they're doing. It's disingenuous to allow people like that to claim to be the experts and know what they're doing when the stuff they come up with doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to any of us. I can't imagine there's any industry people that say, oh yeah, let's sell them dabs at, 1/10 of a gram at a time.
Yeah. And it's misleading too to people who don't know and listen to this and all of a sudden have these different ideas of what it's all about, like thinking that there needs to be a limit. It's it's like bad advertising.
If their kids get a hold of
Talked
it,
about
they're
it
gonna
last
they have to
night.
call the poison center and figure
Right.
out what to do.
Right. We
Exactly.
talked about it last night that down in Florida, what they did when they regulated down to 10 milligrams, and the guy representing the industry said, yeah, and they limit you to how much you can have in a package. So that means that crippled guys like me have to go to the shop every so often because I can't bring home a month's supply. Come on. It just doesn't make any sense.
No. And again, Jamie mentioned the packaging issue. Adam Brook mentioned the convenience issue, the usability. There are just so many concerns about a program like that. When we talk about taxation based on THC percentage, it's based on a concept that the people that use greater THC somehow are either more capable of paying tax, or they are sinning so much more than other people they deserve to pay more tax. The concept of tying a taxation to a THC percentage is predatory on the surface and discriminatory at worst.
And
I can't imagine it.
Well, it's also gonna get bogus testing.
Yeah.
It's gonna create diversion and stuff of that nature. Companies are now gonna run around and see who will test their product the lowest for them.
Shopping testing labs, it's called, and
Yeah.
it is just what it sounds like. Who's going to give my flower the best THC rating, because I know THC rating translates into marketability. And in this instance, maybe somebody who gives me a lower THC rating for my flower so that it sells at a more market competitive rate instead of a higher THC rating where it's in a higher tax bracket that's not likely to move quickly. So manipulating THC numbers could go either up or down in a scheme where high THC is penalized as opposed to high THC is rewarded as it currently is.
Another reason why we should learn the nature of the plant and more about it, and ultimately not worry about that THC number.
We really
Exactly, Jamie. I was thinking the same thing because, you take a bud at the top of the plant, and you take one at the bottom of the plant. One's gotten a little bit more light than the other, and it's going to test differently. And you can't base, one test on a plant, I guess.
Well, but they have then. Here's the problem, Jim. Then they get into their stupid protocols about testing on where you have to grab the different buds. I mean, they think they have thought this all out so that it's going to make some sense, but we know it doesn't.
The person shows up, takes samples from around the batch, which could be, I think, as big as 15 pounds.
Right.
That is then homogenized, ground together, and then a
Over.
gram of that taken out, and those readings are what the tests are
Right.
based on.
It's the most ridiculous thing you ever heard of.
I mean, but because it's so different all over the plant, I guess that's you know, what's fine with me is that doing that gives you an idea that there aren't heavy metals and pesticides and shit like that in it, which is the main thing. And a lot of the places now are including terpenes or offering it for a couple extra bucks or something, which also gives you some good useful information.
The funny thing, when they play these games, what's going to happen is the low THC, high terpene products, which are really what we're all looking for, because they're the ones that get you fucked up. Those are going to take off in the specialty market because, hey, luxury loud.
And this is one of those products, Adam. This is 7% terpenes, and they make sure that they feature that on these.
Luxury loud, yes. 7% terps. I've got one too. And you're absolutely right. If someone comes in at 12 or 16% THC, normally that would be a mids kind of a grade. But if you're at 7% terps, that's preferential. That's
and that number might be viewed like that, but something at 9% THC will kick your ass all over the place, and something at 20 plus might not give you the as great of an effect. So
it's all about the
that whole number gets.
But it becomes a marketing game at that point.
And, but that's why we need more education, man. I mean,
correct. Because the one thing that should not happen here is common everyday marketing should not decimate what we've got. And that's kind of what's been happened. It is, you have companies that have come into the industry and they've marketed their brand to such a point that it doesn't matter the quality of their flower or their concentrates, because people are buying it because it's that brand, not because it's good quality.
Yeah, the truth is some people can't tell. 24% THC might mess them up just the same as a 32% THC. Accepting that THC isn't always a good barometer. People are looking for some way to gauge cannabis. Everybody wants to know, how do I define A, B, C? How do I determine top shelf, especially in an environment where you're discouraged from picking up the cannabis buds, squeezing them with your fingers, smelling them, actually interacting with the cannabis, which is traditionally the way that we used to purchase cannabis in Michigan. So without a barometer other than THC, we need some way to dictate. And in my mind, the way that we dictate the quality other than THC is who the fuck grew it. When I see Real Leaf Solutions on something, I know I'm going to get something that's pretty good. When I see Luxury Loud, I know I'm going to be happy with that. Driven Grow, I know I'm going to be pleased with that. So
Franklin Fields.
Yep, Franklin Fields too. The we just had some, and we had the Lemon OG too, and it was just fantastic.
The Merkel, Lemon OG, and the Hawaiian Punch, I think.
So I got to tell you that when if you discount THC as the barometer of quality, what's left? Who grew it? That's it. Until terpene testing becomes mandatory throughout, and until people themselves can personally identify that they have a connection with myrcene or that pinene really does it for them. Until that happens, it's all about the brand reputation.
I'm sure Jim saw this too. There, and especially being able to see patients repeatedly over a few years. I was in that situation, and so was Jim. And for many people, when they are checking out the different types that are available and something is particularly appealing, oftentimes that one is something that's going to offer some benefits. And if it smells good to you, it's like food. I mean, you're going to enjoy it, and and that's where terpenes I think really come into play here.
You said that your nose will decide which cannabis you're going to purchase today. Well, that was back when we had gigantic jars and you could lift the lid off and you could stick your face right in there and get a great big, pineapple kush.
I can tell you that goes on at the Botanical company. That's a lot of it's deli style. These jars are nice. These buds are replenished regularly. The lid comes off. That nice little wafting without anybody having to play around.
So no hairs in the bud. Right.
Yeah,
you still get the smell. You still get the experience. That's nice.
I will tell you that is one of the disappointing factors I've noticed in the legalized cannabis and regulated market. There's many fewer hairs in your bag of weed.
You like that?
Oh yeah, human and cat and dog.
Cat hair and pubic hair.
Yeah, I mean,
somebody's toenail every once in a while. Yeah.
You just used to see so much more of that stuff.
Yeah.
So since we're throwing out names, let me just say this. Oftentimes you can have 6 different strains grown in the same garden and they kind of sort of taste the same, even though they have different names. But when I experience rare cannabis, RAIR cannabis, each individual strain has its own character. Whether, and I know I've been in their cultivation facilities that sometimes they're grown right next to each other, but when you understand what each individual strain demands and you provide the distinctive mix of nutrients and love that each one of them needs, you really help it express all of the different characteristics, and that makes a big difference.
And each grow kind of creates its own unique microclimatic environment that some strains are more interested in growing in than others. You find that right combination of things and you get the most out of it.
Well, I see some people do pheno hunting where they'll take a whole bunch of seeds perhaps or clones, and they'll grow them up to a certain height just to see how well they're performing it. And a lot of that has to do with how well they're performing in that environment, because that same test performed in a different environment might yield different strong strains. But when you're doing that, when you're taking the time, the energy, and the expense to pheno hunt up front, then what you deliver out the back is so much better. And really, you can tell the growers that go through it, and then the guys that just throw 1,000 clones in there because they got them cheap from YouTube, they know.
Hey, we're coming in kind of last half hour, however much we want to use of it. We're gonna have John Slicker is gonna come on talk about Cannapalooza worldwide. I was hoping maybe to get Ryan Bringle, although that didn't pan out, to maybe talk about the bridge walk and the rally. Hopefully before those things. Hopefully we'll have him on. And but I did want to bring something up that's just of interest to talk about for a little bit. It's not directly related to cannabis, although it's a police reaction or police interaction scenario that certainly has involved cannabis many times. There was just recently a story from the west side of the state, and this is a very common thing, and I just want to explain it. This detain/arrest thing that police do, and in my opinion, kind of get away with, and it's gone on for so long and for so many years. I can't believe that it's not something that's just directly taught, because they get away with it most of the time. And that is detaining people, getting ID, answering a bunch of questions just for the sake of checking out a suspicion and not having any particular crime to describe or that could be related to the person having committed or going to commit or anything, simply for the purposes of, we got to find out what's going on with you, whether or not you're doing something wrong. The reality is they have to be able to actually describe something that is wrong that the person did, the person's going to do, the person's doing. And then go to the investigation. You can go so far as to get ID and ask questions and stuff like that. But detaining
people are too quick to ID themselves.
Suspicion is not a crime.
No.
So if the cop is suspicious, then keep an eye on the person, and if they do a crime, then get them. But it's so, so this story was, and it's not that uncommon. It was a black real estate agent with his son showing somebody a house somewhere on the west side of the state. Real estate sign out front. Nobody's breaking in the door. Nobody's walking out with items of value or anything like that. Neighbor calls out of concern, which maybe is reasonable to a degree in and of itself. The police show up. Even the 15-year-old kid gets put in handcuffs and all types of stuff. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And there are people on the story defending that. Well, the cops had to protect themselves. They had to feel safe. They had to blah, blah, blah. No, they don't have any good reason for violating those people's civil rights under those circumstances, period. But it is so incredibly common. Somebody noticed Sherman barking.
There, people are too quick to offer up their ID to a police officer because they haven't done anything wrong. And many times police are just gathering information.
Yeah. Well, in that case, those three people were black, and they were, I mean, I would have given, in that situation, I would have given them whatever they wanted, considering today's state of affairs with law enforcement and issues like that.
Yeah, you don't want to get shot.
The problem is law enforcement shouldn't be responding in that manner.
Not at all.
Law enforcement should pull up to the house and see the for sale sign and see the key box, the lockbox on the door, and realize that this may or may not be a realtor situation.
But unless there is a reason to believe there's a crime, not just the fact that there could be, which is what they're saying.
Right. They have to reasonably articulate suspicion of a crime.
Right.
And they arrested them without due process. There was nothing like, there were no rights. They put them in handcuffs.
That's arrest.
They
You're
put
under
that
arrest
one-
at that point.
When they detain you and say you're not free to go, that is arrest. So
That-
people want to make
correct.
this
Yeah,
distinction
so-
between that and actually going down to the jailhouse and stuff. But that's bullshit.
And I think they both were put in the car at one point, in the back of the squad car,
That is an arrest. State.
which is
As soon as
you
you're
know,
detained, it's
as
an
soon as you're
arrest.
detained, it's an arrest.
and it wasn't just one car. I think there were multiple cars there
Sure.
to handle this real estate agent showing a house. It was just
Listen,
I know that's why we're talking about it, because
It's so common though, man. And
But
they get
I've been through this. Okay, now I'm a white guy. I can't lie about that. I try, it doesn't work. I checked into a hotel room once. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at my door, and there was 20 police officers outside that door. And I was being investigated for a double homicide at that point. I quickly provided ID, of course, because I had no idea why the police were there. I ran a strip club down the street. I had been in that hotel 1,000 times. They should have known who I was. I checked in. I'd been there 10 minutes. Why are the cops at my door? All I had with me was a tuxedo. It took them 25 minutes to figure out that the name on the ID that I gave them and me were the same person. So I understand when they're doing investigations that they have to do their investigation.
a real investigation. Yeah.
But how they treat you from the time they come into contact with you is the problem. Now, when they burst into my hotel room, because of course there was a knock at the door, I pull back the curtain. Now I saw a cop with his gun out, and I thought, oh, the police are here. And I opened the door. Now, this was many moons ago. I opened the door, and the door blew open, and they rushed the room. But they didn't assault me in any way. They sat me down in a chair, and they literally turned the room over. Now, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a suitcase. I didn't have nothing. I had a tuxedo and a mag light, flashlight. And they asked for ID. Can you prove who you were? At which point, I should have told them to go fuck themselves. But you know what? I didn't have anything to lose. And that's what the average guy's thinking. I didn't do anything wrong. Here's my ID. Then 20 minutes later, they decided that, well, I wasn't the guy that they had the photograph of at the front desk that looked like me. And after they left, I went down, and sure enough, I don't remember taking that photograph, but it looked like me.
And it shouldn't be allowed. Ryan is asking why it's not allowed,
Well,
really.
it's not
you get
allowed.
away with it,
It-
quite often, but it's not allowed.
Reality is, you are free to go unless you are detained. And if you're
Yeah,
smart,
but
you'll
if
walk
you're-
away from a police officer. And I've done
It's
it
a lot
many times.
easier to say if you're I don't know if you're white, so it's a lot
It is
easier.
easier.
Lot
We're not
easier.
going to get shot in the back. I'm sorry to say that, but we're not going to get shot in the back.
Yeah.
And they are.
Well,
White people are.
I have
If
a
it
lot
wasn't
of-
for modern day and people being capturing video, there'd be a lot
I have-
of
right,
a lot more horrible abuses
right.
Or
You can watch these.
continuing.
You can watch these First Amendment audits on YouTube all day long. There are thousands of guys out there that do nothing but
And that real estate situation is a common one too.
right.
That
You-
actually happened in Michigan on those videos.
But you can watch videos of this all day long. There are guys that go out and videotape law enforcement, police stations and prisons and shit from public property.
Yeah, they
to
stand on public
interact with
property
the
and just
police.
like rub it in that they're taking footage of stuff or whatever, and the cops
Right,
come up and
'cause
say,
the
"Hey,
law
what are you doing
states-
here?" And they're just testing how far they go. You know?
The law states that you can video anything you can see with the naked eye.
Yeah.
And you can, as long as you're on public property, you don't have to identify yourself. And they push every fucking button that these cops have. And it's hysterical because you know what the guy's going to say next, just like you know what the cop's going to say next. And it's this little cat and mouse game. And the one thing you keep hearing is, am I detained or am I free to go? And every time the cop says you're detained, you'll see something in that video where the guy mentions that he won in court. Because
That's the other thing. Cops they have to pay out settlements all the time, or the
Millions
cops get,
of dollars.
Or the cops get whatever, like some type of penalty or whatever it is when this gets done. They continue to do it.
right,
Yeah.
millions and millions and millions of dollars are paid out regularly, and the cops continue to do it. But at the same time, we know that the city of Detroit has 36 police officers that aren't qualified to testify in court, and they keep them on. They haven't gotten rid
a
of
lot
them.
of those cops on that list are no longer on the force. It's kind of a more of a political, like I did something good list than it is that incredibly functional of a list.
Yeah. So the list that's being referred to is a list that was publicized in media listing Detroit police officers who've been ruled incapable of testifying in a court of law because they've perjured themselves in the past and no longer have the trust of the court. So normally you'd think that means you're dishonest and you can't be a police officer, right? But not in Detroit.
There's 20 some Wayne County deputies on that list also.
In Wayne County.
And that was put out by the prosecutor Kim Worthy.
Right. I mean, I'm just fascinated that that's even a concept in America jurisprudence. But, there's we got to get rid of the qualified immunity some way, somehow. And once they're responsible for the things they do, then maybe they'll do things differently and appropriately.
And responsibility stops not just at the officer that performed the act that we think is wrong, but also at the supervisor that's tolerated behavior, that's fostered an attitude at the precinct that's acceptable behavior, and then go beyond that to the person who hired or continues to tolerate someone who's in a command position who lets rogue police officers just abuse people. So the fact is, you have to have accountability all the way up the line. It can't just be the individual that did the act, because chances are that's not the first time that person did that. And we also need an outside group to help determine disciplinary situations too. When there are citizen complaints against police officers, we can't just have it handled by the police agency because they sweep it under the rug and they underreport the number of times a particular officer's complained about. That needs to be a citizen watchdog group that actually handles those and tallies those outside of the police agencies.
Well, they fight against police commissions anywhere they can. It's a sad state of affairs. I like to point out that people have this concept that there are no good police officers, and I tend to agree with them because of what Rick just mentioned. That how many times has that good police officer written down the name of a fellow officer in a complaint form for violating a rule or a law? I mean, they can't say they didn't see it happen. Shit, I watch Cops and I see it happen. So, it's things like that just make it so the rest of us who have nothing to do with it want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of law enforcement officers out there that do a great job and that actually interact well with the community. I've seen personal examples in my own life, but oftentimes when a caregiver blows up a house because he's making RSO in a stupid fashion, all caregivers get a black eye because of the actions of that one. Same thing with police officers too. It's sad that we are all defined by the worst actor among us, but it is sort of true in a media frenzied environment as we are right now. The bad guys get all the press and the good guys get nothing. And in this instance, we're talking about a lot of bad guys, but I think it'd be wrong of us not to mention there's a lot of good law enforcement officers out there. And we want people to continue to respect cannabis. People that have had a cannabis experience in their life before becoming a police officer, those are cops that respect our industry, generally speaking.
Serpico was a good cop, right?
I mean, I think he was a totally shit cop until he busted on his other guys because he beat the shit out of people. He was horrible in New York City until he busted on everybody else.
Kind of confirm, maybe we should have him on at some point for an extended conversation on here. Former, Canton detective Steve Miller, who works with Comorn Law, has testified in committee hearings in Lansing that the department would encourage, in order to get an arrest for the record of it or whatever benefit they get more grants or something like that. They would literally say, go find some black guy walking around someplace and give him enough shit until you get enough on him to arrest him artificially and bring him in.
But Nixon figured that out. So this has been a long time running that we now, and one of the things I point out, and here's a real problem that, I happen to be wearing my Coleman shirt today, and I'll bring it up.
Coleman Young Jr., former mayor of Detroit.
Yeah, Coleman did one of the great things in Detroit, and when he became mayor, his goal was to darken the police force, is what he said. You know, he wanted to hire young black officers so that the police department looked more like the community. The problem with that is you hire in these young black kids who are then taught by old white police officers how to be police officers. So the mentality didn't change. And then in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you had police officers who were treating people that looked like them horribly. You know, the crack cocaine era was decimated Detroit, but how these people were treated was abhorrent, some of the things that were done. And that didn't work so well. And how do you fix that? Well, I think we see now how you fix that. I think this new concept of, re-educating police officers and teaching that everybody's, yeah, I mean, and adding some civility to the whole concept.
Complete overhaul. It's shit like that keeps on going on.
That and the dog.
Hear about other? Yes, he's been through a lot of shit lately, so
I know.
When you start talking about police, it makes them nervous. You know, one of the things we've seen in police agencies is this, let's call it warrior training, where cops are go to a 6 or 7 hour seminar where they have people who train them to think about it like a warrior. In other words, that everybody out there is a potential killer, and every person you encounter could kill you. So never approach someone without your guard up. Always make sure that you're standing off from people. Don't ever get too close, because they could go for your gun or they could hurt you in some way,
right,
because people are sneaky and tricky. That just teaches police officers how to hate people. I think we should outlaw that type of training.
And because of that training, when I come in contact with a police officer in any situation where they are enforcing the law upon me, the first statement I make is, "Officer, we are both going home tonight." Because I know personally, when they run my license and they see who I am, it's going to cause them some interest as to maybe what's in my car or what I'm doing or whatnot. So I just want them to know that, hey, I come in peace. And I don't know how else to do that other than to let them know up front that, I'm not, whatever we got to do to get through this interaction, let's do it and move on. Because your traffic violation should never rise to the point that, violence is being committed on either party, for that matter.
Right. City of Flint Police Department, the chief talked recently in media about how important it was traffic stops. They said they get more felony arrests based on traffic stops. It's a great way for us to take bad guys off the street. And maybe from a police perspective, that's true. You do put more people in jail, but from a citizen's perspective, you stop somebody for a cracked windshield, which was bullshit in the first place, but then you escalated it into a felony narcotics stop. And now everybody that watches that, because it happens in the city, everyone that watches it learns to distrust police officers, because the example you set is that you take a little teeny thing and you turn it into something huge. So
and if you're gonna get me for a felony, I might as well run. I might as well try to get away.
Because the last time you stopped me on some bullshit thing, you put me on a felony there too. So now I'm a two-time loser in your mind.
Right.
So,
and I'm going back anyways.
Yeah.
I always tell people, if I'm smoking a joint and a cop pulls up behind me and lights me up, I'm dialing 911, and I'm telling 911 that when I'm done smoking up all the weed I got with me, I'll pull over. Because the reality is I'm going to jail, right? So if I'm going to go to jail, I might as well smoke my weed. Motherfuckers.
I'm not sure 911 would respond by blaze up, big man.
Very, very good idea. Make sure you don't pull over until you're absolutely finished with all of it.
All of it.
Dispatcher will advise you.
Get rid of the
evidence. While I was driving and you guys had your lights on, so now I've got another one. So we're gonna.
Right.
It's one of those slow chases that last
That's
forever.
right. OJ.
Yeah, I think Jen brings up here in that last statement that there's a certain mentality that is looked for in some cases for this police warrior mentality or whatever sometimes.
There was. I think they're trying to get rid of that. I think they're using.
I hope so, man, but it never fucking really stops.
No, right. Because of the training they get and the mentality. I mean, don't forget that they've been able to militarize themselves through all kinds of bogus grants from the federal government. Yeah. Bulletproof vests are now something that are put on when they leave for work in the morning, not when they come upon a situation where it may or may not be needed. They show up like they're ready for war. And
Jamie just witnessed a raid on a house where they used a military-style vehicle to come up on it.
Yeah, they had one of those MRAPs. Jen was there. Adam was there too.
Yeah, we had one in Troy recently. Another same situation, by the way. The last I-75 shooting, the guy ended up in Troy, and they rolled up, and it was interesting because if you go on your next door and you read it, all these people were freaked out that the military showed up in their neighborhood. And you had to point out to them that, no, that's not the military. That's your local government. That's your local police department who owns that vehicle. Because they think they need an armor-plated tank. I mean, the one in Warren gets used more than any other armored tank in the state. Because they don't fuck around. They just roll right up in your house. And
they love their toys in Warren. Warren,
right.
Michigan, for those who don't know, is a community just adjacent to Detroit and is known as a kind of a tough community. It's one of the very largest cities in the state. It's very packed in residential areas and also some very big industrial zones too. So when you're talking about military hardware like that in a residential area, it's very frightening to the citizens. But as an onlooker, I'm thinking, well, what this does is normalize the presence of military gear in a citizen situation, which is just preparing people for the next step, which is a greater military presence in our neighborhoods, not a lesser one. So,
no,
just a few cents on that. I'm not a big fan of translating military gear to local police departments. In fact, if you have a state police that has all that stuff, they're always available whenever you need it. All you do is you ask, and they come right out. So
I believe the federal government has stopped that, though. I don't think you can get repurposed gear like you used to.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Remember the fiasco that took place in Thetford Township? There's just some local cannabis things being discussed there, and some people were at that meeting, and I guess it was kind of fiasco-ish. But that whole township has been through a lot of stuff. For a small place, man, had a lot of drama.
Police Chief Kenny lost his job and is been sued.
Yeah, but they found the money. It was just hanging out amidst some of the stuff.
You're using sarcasm, but people that don't know the story might think that they actually did, and the Police Chief Kenny was innocent. But he actually staged. It looks like it seems that he staged the discovery of this missing money, which happened to be with some person with the camera there, some kind of eyewitness. In a trailer that he had controlled for a long time. So it's a whole big long thing. The fact is there are some abuses of a program designed to give local police departments some tools that maybe they could use. But I don't see where gas masks and military vehicles are part of that.
The great example is, and now I forgot his name because I started talking about it, but SWAT was created by the police chief of Los Angeles.
But it was for real serious situations, right?
But what SWAT was it was intended to have officers who were well trained, who, when their pager went off, would respond to a specific scene. And then, because LA was such a large city, they actually could have a SWAT unit that was on staff full time. It was never intended to serve search warrants. It was never intended to respond.
Victimless shit, man. I mean,
right.
Like hostages and stuff. I mean, real serious shit. It was never
intended to militarize the police department. Right. And now Daryl Gates was his name, by the way.
Well, they just made a bunch of fucking money off it and realized.
Right. And what ended up happening was people took Daryl Gates's brilliant idea of SWAT and they used it to get all kinds of grants to turn all their officers into jackbooted thugs.
The rise of the warrior cop, which is like
RoboCop, man.
Right?
Listen, it's all about. You got to be proud to be from Detroit because we invented this shit with RoboCop.
Yeah.
Hey, Adam, we got with a few minutes left. Adam, keep going. Let us know anything else you want to add before we wrap up here for the night.
Dude, I don't even know what day it is. I was on a roll and you interrupt. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, you were on RoboCops.
I
Keep
was,
going,
man. No, but the reality is this, that the system we have now is being fixed. Hopefully, many of us will live long enough to see how wrong these people have to admit they were. And that's what I'm all about. You know, there was some hope the other day. I saw a photograph of the former chief of police and Rick Wershey in the same photograph, almost with arms around each other.
White boy Rick, famous FBI informant, drug dealer from the Detroit history.
Just recently let out of prison.
Who, if he could talk without getting slaughtered, would have a lot to say about Detroit police officers.
He has
set
right
him
to
up.
be worried. There's still some people that are alive that would not want him to talk.
Correct. But the reality is that things are changing. And a lot of these people are having their come to Jesus moment when it comes to what they've done in the past. And the weed game, it's all over, people. You got to change your ways. You know, you got to change how you treat people. It's not going to be, society's not going to put up with it much longer. And there may be enclaves of certain spots where they put up with it. But even that's going to have to change because we travel and word will get out that you treat people that way. And that's why these boycott type things make a difference, because if we don't like what you have to say, we've got social media on our side nowadays. And it may not actually be a real boycott, but when you get thousands of people talking about you and they're not talking about you in a good way, that's what makes a difference.
Yeah, social media crosses state lines. So anything said by a Michigan personality influences Illinois, Colorado, California. It influences the purchase decisions of real people. And most of our social media accounts are populated by people who actually have budgeted money that they spend every single week or month on cannabis. We are the premium of the customers that these retailers want. I know we're just about out of time. Jim, you want to take the Entheo show real quick?
Oh, yeah. Entheo show will be back up August 20th, is next Friday at 4 p.m. With Michael File Williams, Colin McDougall, and myself, and some special guests. We're going to continue every other week with that. And then Entheo Fest is September 19th. That's in downtown Ann Arbor on campus, right in front of the Hatcher Library where they do Hash Bash at 11 a.m. So
I want to say happy birthday, Colin McDougall. Happy birthday, Jamie Lowell, coming up. Colin just passed. Jamie in the future. Yay to both of you.
And I'm curious, before we go real quick, Jim, and we let Rick take us out, what's the significance of 11/11?
You know, it's a good way to end the program, but I really don't know the significance other than it's got a magical numerological number, 1111. People, you know, say it's lucky in some cases.
I would argue if you take your mushrooms at 11:11, you're high by noon.
Well, it's usually about an hour and a half. But yeah, well, that's a little bit about it.
Yeah.
An empathetic number, yeah. Empathic.
1111 has been known by numerologists for a long time to signify different things. So, Jamie, did you have anything else to add?
No, I'm now going to be kind of stuck on the issue of this police scenario, and I think I want to explore it a little bit further. I might look into some future shows of really getting into where these lines are, what people's rights are, and help offering up another forum to some degree for people to know what their position actually is when they're confronted in these situations.
I would encourage people to watch those First Amendment audit videos.
I watched some of those too
on YouTube. It's absolutely amazing.
So there's one called Audit the Audit. And
the audit.
That person goes through a lot of, they don't say, hey, don't do this as legal advice, which is true, but they go through a really thorough process of the local and federal laws and as they apply to each situation. And sometimes the cops are great and the person's the person that they're talking with is the asshole and is wrong, and vice versa. And you get an idea of many different types of interactions, you know.
Right.
It's well worth watching. You'll learn a lot.
Well, to wrap up Jazz Cabbage Cafe today, boy, thanks a lot to Amie Carter and her son Jayden for sharing their story and also providing some inspiration. It was nice to see Shelly again with her big old slightly dirty hat. that she talked about. But in reality, what we're talking about here is a lot of progress. There are some challenges. There are some molehills that have been turned into mountains, and we'd like to flip them back to molehills. But the fact is, every single day, every single conversation, we move closer to our end goal. And I want to thank everyone here for being part of the change that we all hope America is going to undergo in the near future. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Rick. Jazz Cabbage Cafe, everybody. Thanks everyone again, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Bye now.